Hello, Psych of Emotion. Let's talk a little emotion talk. Here we are, Lecture 8, Theories and Analyses. We got a whole bunch of interesting people going to visit us during this lecture. We got some sociologists, we got some advertisers, we got some existential psychologists, pretty wide range of beings coming to share their knowledge with us. So, and again, the OHIO, this is a pretty cool looking one, right? So let's get started. First, we're going to come at all this from a clinical perspective. So we're going to talk a little emotion and psychological well-being. Consider all the forces that instruct us how to live, and psychological well-being is all important. Happiness is paramount. Repression and suppression are enemies of authenticity and self-actualization. So if you're taking psych of adjustment, you're probably up on these terms right off the bat. But the feeling of repressing or suppressing emotions, oppressing aspects of the self, then interfere with us becoming authentic or self-actualizing. We must be able to express how we feel or potential disaster. Do you buy this? I mean, I'm being tongue-in-cheek and serious all at the same time here. And yet, this is difficult to operationalize, measure, and provide empirical support. So we may talk a good game, but how do we empirically support this conversation? Well, there are techniques, and emotional disclosure paradigm is one way that we can kind of look at this, at least according to James Pennebaker. So, inhibition and lack of expression are associated with ill health and psychopathology. And there's clinical evidence to support this. A repeated measures paradigm, clients are asked to disclose through conversation and written media. That is, they're allowed to or asked to put it out there, right? Those whose disclosures that are negative affect laden, have a lot of negative emotion discussion, more often demonstrate fewer visits to general practitioners over time. So that is, they're going to the GP less often for health complaints when they've expressed more negativity in the emotional disclosure paradigm. That's pretty interesting. Explanation then, emotional inhibition leads to immune system suppression, resulting in more visits to the doctor. So when we talked about stress and emotion, right, then we're kind of extending the idea that inhibiting my emotions might in fact increase my level of stress. Now, there's a lot of different ways to go on that comment, but just from this point of view, let's go with it. So this inhibition confrontation then, the assumption is that emotional inhibition is psychologically effortful, and there's a lot of evidence to support that point, right? An active process that instigates short-term arousal, and that accumulates to operate as a chronic stressor. So if we chronically inhibit what's on our mind, if we constantly bite back on our emotional expression and don't allow it, it's going to wear us down through increasing our stress, at least at a low level. Right? So using EDP or some other method has the potential to reduce the arousal and eventually counter that immunosuppressive consequence of the arousal. That is letting it out. And some of you might be thinking, well, that sounds a little bit like catharsis, that putting it out there will make me feel better. And under some certain circumstances, that may be the case. But the catharsis hypothesis is also overblown and flies against some kind of empirical studies as well. I think the big question then, when we see a mixed bag of results, benefits and negatives, we are kind of put in a position where we need to ask, but under what conditions? Context matters, in other words. It's possible that simply rehashing the experience, right, may just cause one to continue to relive the traumatic event. That we have to do so, relive the traumatic event in a way that's designed to be constructive, rather than simply just telling it over and over again. I'm sure you've seen people who are angry about something and they tell us a story, and we watch as they tell the story, right? They just re-anger themselves. They become angry all over again. And it's not necessarily moving past it, it's simply perhaps rehashing it. So I'll leave it at that, right? Now, suppression versus repression, let's do some definitional work here. Suppression is thought to be a conscious process. I don't want to think about this. I'm not going to talk about this. This is suppression. But when we talk repression, we're talking kind of a Freudian non-conscious mechanism, right? It's thought to be unconscious. Repression can be further divided then as inhibitory or subtractive. That is, we degrade the signal, right? So we distract from it and we kind of mask it or hide it. Or elaborative or additive, we add noise to the signal. Oh, it's not that bad, right? That we take the signal away from its true nature and kind of transform it, maybe inauthentically so, within the context of what we're saying here. So it can be further divided into active, controlled, deliberate, or at least somewhat conscious attempt to constrain thoughts or feelings, or it may be passive and automatic. That is wholly non-conscious inhibition of affect. And notice the approach to getting at those would be very different, let's say in a therapeutic sense. But let's talk anger for a second as an example of suppression or repression. So I'm pissed off. What am I going to do? Well, I've been told before I respond, I'm angry. Before I respond, I should count to 10, right? And what I'm trying to do then is allow my anger to dissipate as a conscious strategy, right? So we'll call that suppression because it's conscious. Repression, right, is put on a cheerful front, unconsciously deny impulses. Oh, I'm not really angry. There's nothing to get angry about. Right? And that would be unconsciously motivated. So much for our clinical perspective. We're going to push this a little more into a social conversation and not much about social forces. So emotional disclosure and inhibition confrontation are relatively non-nuanced constructs. If the expression or inhibition of emotion is important to the creation of meaning in life, and culture, a broader approach might just be desirable. So Derrida is one of our original deconstructionists, and as I promised you, as we move toward the end of the course, we want to start undoing some of what we've come to learn. Derrida suggests that everything is text, and it's the primacy of emotion and text that allows us to understand our place in our culture, the subjective nature of emotion, and thus we create meaning. So we're exploring the limits of culture, which is, kind of culture and language, right? Come together like this. If we don't have a word for it, can we feel it? And to what extent is the culture and our vocabulary, our language, then either enhancing or inhibiting our ability to express our emotions, right? And so we begin to deconstruct texts to look at how they are able to create meaning. Now, in looking at content, and looking at this then, what we're going to do is start looking at language, but I also want us to look at imagery. And I want us to look at music. We did the assignment where we compared the audio and the video, and you guys were very good at discussing how audio versus video affected your perception of what was going on and some of the emotional impact that it had on you. There are people who do this for a living, so I want to look at this. I want us to look at this commercial, right? And I want you to look at all the elements, and this is homework number 8, right? So you can see the assignment. But look at all the elements and how they affect the message to the viewer, to the intended audience. And I think I love this commercial. I think this is amazingly well done, and I don't think there's a split second, a half a second in this commercial that wasn't by design. This is not something they just got this together, gave them a script and said, okay, go for it. Every element, every visual element, every auditory element, the way movement is used in the commercial, attend to every feature of the commercial you can. Probably jot down little notes as you're watching it. May need to see it a couple times to fully understand what's going on here and how amazing this commercial is. Now, it's not something that you're likely to want to buy. That's off of that because it's actually a reverse mortgage commercial. So I'm just going to set this here.
know what you're thinking. I thought what you thought. Some things are just too good to be true. Just like you, I thought that reverse mortgages had to have some kind of catch, just a way for the banks to get your house, right? Well, then I did some homework, and I found out it's not any of that. It's not another way for the bank to get your house, and it's also not too good to be true. A reverse mortgage loan is a simple idea, really. You turn your home's equity into cash, and you pay it back when you leave the house. Most people use the money to pay off their existing mortgage or pay some bills, cover medical costs, even update their home. And, just as importantly, you still own your home. And you make no monthly mortgage payments. It's a loan designed just for older Americans, and it's helped hundreds of thousands to live a more stable, secure retirement and stay in the home they love.
AAG is the leader in reverse mortgages. Call us today for your free information kit. It will answer all your questions and help you decide if a reverse mortgage is right for you and how to qualify.
I know what you're thinking. I did too. I felt the same way. But I checked it out, and I found out a lot more. It's pretty simple. A reverse mortgage from AAG can give you the retirement stability you're looking for. Maybe you want to check it out.
If you're 62 or older and own your own home, give AAG a call to receive your free information kit. You'll receive the information you're looking for, as well as tell you how much cash you may qualify for. Call 1-800-816-7908 today.
AAG, bringing stability to your retirement.
Well, tell me that you're not totally enthralled and excited by that commercial. Or not. But every element is by design. So whether we're talking nonverbal behavior, postures, movement, lighting, sound, every aspect of that has been manipulated to emotion, cause the evocation of emotional aspects, the relationship of the commercial. So for homework 8, what we're looking at doing then is each team member is to complete one of the numbered points on this assignment and thus identify them. So, and if you have less than 6 team members, just go ahead and double up on 1 or 2. It's not that much. So what is the initial situation for the target viewer, and what emotion are the viewers likely experiencing to even engage the commercial, right? Who is it targeted to, and what are they likely to be feeling that this commercial has meaning or impact to them? Number 2, who's the actor? Why was that actor chosen? What is the intended effect of this actor on the viewer, right? 3, what are 5 visual props that are used to evoke emotion? And notice there's props throughout this commercial. That set was chosen and it was designed and adorned purposefully each step of the way. Name 5 props and the associated emotion for each. Duplicate emotions are okay, right? Okay. 4, what's going on with the setting in general? The actor's movement related to it. The actor's nonverbal behaviors might be described as part of this response, as I suggested earlier. 5, what about lighting and color? So someone take that on. How does it affect the emotional tone? The overall emotion that maybe isn't as easily identifiable, but the tone. And remember, tone is an aspect of emotion I've been trying to pitch since earlier in the course. 6, what about the music and the voice? How do they affect the emotional tone and or support the narrative? So these are all aspects you can play to. Go ahead and work it out, and really as a template you can turn it in like this, right? And just then put the response under each. Okay? So questions about that? If you got questions, I want to see you at our synchronous session Thursday at 4 or office hours Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Let's talk cognitive reappraisal. Now, shifting gears, given that memory is a constructive revisionist process, and most of us by now know that memory is not a file cabinet where I just pull this thing out intact. A memory is constructed as I am accessing it. right? Creating a coherent narrative may increase one's belief that they better understand the experience and increase the sense of controllability. So coherence matters when it comes to memory. Reappraisal allows us to alter the meaning of the events and thus potentially diminishing the negative effect of the event. That is, something may have occurred where I significantly embarrassed myself, but over time I reappraise that event as an important life lesson rather than the source of profound embarrassment. If I find myself as a strong, adaptive, forward-moving individual, notice how this is critical to my self-image, my self-narrative, to be able to reframe negative experiences as life lessons rather than things that would necessarily devastate me. So, creating a new narrative may create new insights to the event and thus diminishing its potential impact, especially its negative impact. In all these cases, there may be a shift from the emotional to the rational understanding of the event, that is, minimize the negative emotions and supplant them with rational explanations for the benefits of the event, right? And therefore, then the emotional component of that event probably begins to drop out of memory, or the emotional event tends to transform from an uncomfortable emotion to a more comfortable emotion, if you will. Yeah. Now, referential activity. This is the process. The process of referential activity organizes nonverbal experience, right, and expresses it in language or words. It's the process of conversion. So first, a significant emotional experience is recalled at the visceral level. That is the feeling level, the viscera, that internal. That's how emotions often present themselves to us initially. That's the feeling, is the visceral. And it's via usually autonomic nervous system activity, right? And we may notice a change in vocal tone as part of that. And we notice if we have a tremendous emotional shift, it often is reflected in our voice, right? Second, then, a symbolic image is constructed that can be either pictorial or linguistic, right? But it's the basis of forming that narrative. Finally, the image is expressed concretely, and this is where we find the words for it, and the affective experience then is fully integrated into the narrative. So you see, what we're talking about here is viscera that is transformed, converted to language as a sense-making device that aids in the narrative construction. And this happens over time, and in some forms of psychotherapy, this is what is actually the goal, is to take this experience of, let's say, intense anxiety and develop it, linguistically represent it, right, so that we can make it real, we can have a narrative that explains it and then make meaning of it. And from there, we're ready to move on and deal with it more effectively. So, content analysis of emotion. Well, there's a lot of ways to get at this. Notice that emotion is measurable in some very strange fashions. We'll talk more about that in research, emotion in research as well. Linguistic inquiry and word count. When looking at emotional expression or during inhibition confrontation, affect words are simply counted. So in this person's narrative of what happened, how often do they refer to an affective state or the experience of emotion? And we count the number of words. And so we can look at the number of words. We can also look at the variety of words, to look at the diversity within the experience. And affect words such as hate, love, hope, feeling, these are affect words that would be counted. High proportions of affect words tend to demonstrate significant levels of inhibition confrontation. That is, I'm willing to put it out there. I'm willing to confront the inhibition. And notice in therapeutic sessions over time, we may have the goal of seeing higher levels of inhibition confrontation. And how do we know that's occurring? Because we should see the number of affect-laden words increase in these. Lower proportion of affect words, right, demonstrate high levels of emotional inhibition and probably indicate more therapeutic exploration of the situation. Now, this relative assessment of affective content is facilitated, but fails to account for a large number of possible confounding variables. So, many times when we're looking in a therapeutic sense, empirical evidence is hard to kind of nail down, right? That there are other possible explanations. It does have, though, the potential to measure progress in the emotional expression and treatment efficacy, probably largely untested, right? So let us then call this part 1, and